Bible prophecy is being fulfilled all around us. What's really happening behind the scenes in the nation of Israel right now? What led up to this moment? And more importantly, what is next? Everything you need to know is going to be discussed right here on this program today. And we have a guest today who's uniquely qualified to speak into this issue. I believe it's divine providence that he's here with us today. But before I introduce him, I want you to introduce yourself right there where you're watching from. Let us know where you're watching from because Evan is going to be watching you. Evan.
Right here. Yeah, it would be helpful if I was unmuted. But Jamie, good to see you from Texas. Our Texas family is in the chat. Jamie actually asked the question, is the peace treaty in the Middle East a fulfillment of the peace treaty in the Bible? I think we might get into that today. Vicky, great to see you from Youngsville, North Carolina. Mike Brentall holding down the fort in Arizona. He's looking forward to seeing you, Pastor, in a couple days. That'll be awesome at the Voice of God conference.
That's right. We're going to be in Arizona, right? We're going to be Arizona with Joseph Z. Voice of God conference is going to be wild. So if you're in the area, come join us.
Absolutely. Dr. Kim Hunt from Red Cross. Boomhour says hello. Kim from PA. Joe, Vicky, Isaac. It's great to see you guys. If you have a question throughout the stream, put 4 question marks before your question. That way we can easily mark it and save it for later.
Even in secular media, they are talking about how this is historic. 3,000 years, some have been saying, in the making. But what does it mean specifically for you? And I can tell you right now, we've got teams on the ground right now doing missions work, teams on the ground right now in the nation of Israel. I'm going to share with you later how you can help be a part of that and partner with us to bring relief and help. But is prophecy being fulfilled today? We've got a guest today who is a leading geopolitical analyst and commentator. He's seen on Stacklebeck Tonight and The Watchman on YouTube. Spent 10 years as a correspondent, as a matter of fact, and host Middle East analyst for CBN News. He's a best-selling author, and he's the most informed person on this issue, as far as I'm concerned, that we can have. Would you please welcome to the program Erick Stakelbeck? Good to have you, brother.
Alan, great to be with you as always.
Man, we were talking before the program. This is divine providence that you're here. Can you give us a little bit of your background as far as working in the Middle East so they kind of know where you're coming from?
Yeah, Alan, hey, for such a time as this, no doubt that I'm here with you today. Well, I've been covering the Middle East extensively, closely for 23 years at least, probably longer than that. Been to Israel over 30 times. I've been traveled throughout the region, Iraq, UAE, Egypt, Jordan, etc. It goes on. So intimately acquainted with the region, number one, from the on-the-ground perspective. But number two, just interviewing Israeli leaders and building those relationships, Alan, over the decades. Last month in Jerusalem, I sat down with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for about an hour, interviewed him extensively, spent time with him. So the on-the-ground perspective, I think, has really enhanced my kind of commentary, my analysis of the situation. And of course, when you bring that and you combine that with the truth of the Bible and knowledge of what the Bible says about it, I think that's a good combination.
Yeah, no question. And your journey into this type of journalism is a very fascinating, interesting journey. We're going to get to the prophecies being fulfilled in Israel right now, here in just a few moments. And I'm going to show you guys videos, so hang tight. We're going to show videos of things that Trump is saying that seems to be fulfillment of Bible prophecy. But first, I want you to see this. Let's take a look at this. 16 years ago, I saw this video of this gentleman on YouTube. Here he is. Let's take a look at this real fast.
Critics say the left's war against the CIA began in the 1970s. After Vietnam, secret assassination plots, and domestic spying, Democrats in Congress investigated the agency closely.
Okay, there you are on CBN. There you are on CBN. I try to find videos of people years ago, when they're less polished. It is impossible to find a video of you less polished. You are always the consummate professional. What would you have said to yourself, before we dive into kind of your story here in a moment, what would you have said to yourself, that person, if you could give some advice to that person or talk to that person 16 years ago, what would you say?
Get a haircut, number one. Fix your hair. Now, at first, I didn't, Alan, it's funny. I had a blank expression at first because I didn't know it was me at first. Right. I was like, wait a minute, that's me. That is so funny, man. I'm so glad you dug that up. Man, advice I would give, let your personality shine through. Be yourself. Let your God-given personality shine through. I think that would be the key. Don't try to emulate someone else. Just be you. Be the person God equipped you to be and use the skills God gave you, the unique giftings. He's given all of us unique giftings in whatever our line of work is. Just find your own voice. And I did really find my voice. Around that time, 2009, 2010, I felt like, wow, now this is really who I am, and I'm really using the voice that God gave me. I'm not trying to be anybody else. I have figured it out at that point.
Well, it's tough, especially in the work that you do, because if you're going to be a journalist, you want to be kind of stoic, stone-faced, not being too emotive. But you've always been dynamic in your presentation of the news, and as far as I'm concerned, revelatory. Which this journey that you went through, you were a sports writer, weren't you?
Yeah, it's been a wild ride. You know, I was raised in a working class neighborhood in Northeast Philadelphia, a place called Fox Chase, which I love dearly. Never thought I'd be a TV guy. I was a writer. My passion was writing and journalism in that sense. And I started out, Alan, I graduated college in 1999. And my first job out of college was working for a local newspaper in the Philadelphia area, covering high school sports. You got to start somewhere. I was 22 years old. You have to start somewhere. But learned how to, number one, cover events. I was interviewing people.
Mm-hmm.
I had deadlines. So it was a great learning experience. And I got my big break, so to speak. God moved fast. I moved to New York City shortly thereafter and worked at a magazine up there covering the NBA, covering professional basketball. That was a dream for me. I was a basketball player. You've met me in person. I'm about 6'5".
Yeah.
So played basketball, loved the game. That was kind of a dream come true. I'm living in New York City, but it was very unfulfilling at the end of the day. And the key point here, Alan, I did not know the Lord personally at that point. I had not been born again. So I felt all alone up there in New York City, but still a great learning experience, interviewing. I'm covering games at Madison Square Garden, interviewing people and writing for a national publication. Came back to Philadelphia after about a year and trying to figure out my next move. And side note here, I'd always been a passionate observer, follower of the Middle East from my dad. Fascinating upbringing. My mom was a devout Catholic, but my dad was a Protestant, you would say. He knew the Bible, and he was a Bible prophecy buff, I would say. He worked in a factory.
Really?
And he did. He was with a group of guys. He worked in a factory, and there was a Bible study at this factory. He was an electrician. He was a salt-of-the-earth guy, a brilliant guy, very intellectually curious. But he was in this Bible study, and they start reading Hal Lindsey. Now, if you know that name, he was a pretty famous prophetic author, especially in the 1970s and 80s. He wrote a book called The Late Great Planet Earth. So my dad is devouring everything about Israel and prophecy, and he starts kind of looping me in, dinner table conversations, and he gives me Hal Lindsey's book, The Late Great Planet Earth. Now, by that time, I was 21, living in the world. I read that book, and it really caught my attention, needless to say, because I've been following world events very closely. My dad was a political junkie, kind of a world affairs junkie, loved Israel in particular. He would say, Eric, Israel is the apple of God's eye. And he would talk about not just God, but the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Yes.
So that's kind of the atmosphere I was raised in with my dad, and he had such a strong influence on my life. And he instilled that love and that interest in Israel in me when I was 14 years old.
Wow.
I'd never read the Bible for myself, Alan. I would listen to my dad talk about the Bible, and I loved to hear it, but I never picked up the Word of God for myself, get this, until I was 27 years old.
Wow.
But the turning point when I was 21, my dad gave me The Late Great Planet Earth, the Hal Lindsey book. I said, oh gosh, these things are unfolding now, what he's writing about. And that really got the gears turning. God was really working on my heart. As I said, I moved back from New York City. 9/11 happens. Just a few months prior, I'd been living there in New York City. And at that point, there's more to it. This is the Cliff Notes version, but I poured all of my energy into covering the Middle East, Islamic terror, national security. That was around 2001, 2002. And the rest is history. Shortly thereafter, I moved to Washington, D.C., where I worked at CBN News. You just showed that old clip, and it's been quite a journey. And there's a lot more to it, but it's been quite a journey. But that's how I started.
There's a lot more to it. You're even kind of shot in the process, and
absolutely,
that was kind of a pivotal moment.
Yeah, Alan, that's where how'd I bury the lead, right? We say in journalism. My journalism, my media career, I'm sitting here with you right now. It all started, Alan, in a hospital bed 10 hours after I was shot. Now, I mentioned in Philadelphia, I grew up in Philadelphia. It's got a pretty gritty reputation, and rightfully so. Some call it the city of brotherly love. For me, it was more like the city of brotherly shove, I like to say. I love Philadelphia, but I just graduated college. This was April 1999. And I'm getting together with some old friends, and we go to the local playground where we all hung out, and we're playing pickup basketball. So we're done playing, and we're just standing around talking, about 20 of us just catching up, lifelong friends. Long story short, 3 guys come walking up, clearly under the influence of something. And they were looking for someone. It was over drugs. Surprise, surprise. The guy they were looking for, a younger guy, wasn't there. They leave. I don't really think much about it. About 5 minutes later, one of them comes walking back. And there's about a 10-foot high chain link fence separating my group from this one individual. Now he's swaying back and forth. He's clearly under the influence of something. Now I'm starting to pay attention a little bit. Your street smart sensors go off a little bit and you say, okay, why did this guy come back? He starts exchanging words with the group. I'm still kind of on the periphery watching this. It all happened very fast. All of a sudden, I hear a loud pop, and I feel what I describe as a force against my right hip. I describe it, Alan, like someone backed up a car, put a car in reverse at top speed and backed into me like you see in the movies. It was that kind of force. And I look up and I see this, I call him the swaying stranger with a gun in his hand. And instantly it registers, oh my gosh, I've been shot. This guy just shot me. I didn't fall to the ground, believe it or not. Pure adrenaline. I turned right around. I ran. Everyone scattered. He's got a gun. And I run out to the parking lot where there were cars parked. 2 friends were driving, and I hopped in. I said, guys, I've been hit. And I'm looking down at these shorts that I have. I still have these basketball shorts. I should have brought them on with the bullet hole in them. Oh, I do. I saved them. Gosh, 26 years ago. But I get to the hospital. There's blood everywhere. And in the region I was shot, Alan, it's in my hip, but it's near my kidneys, my liver. You think you're going to die. I mean, when you get shot, you assume I'm going to die. In a region like that, of course, you assume you're going to die. And I get to the hospital. It's touch or go. Then they say, okay, you're going to live. But here was the kicker. The bullet, and it's a .22 caliber bullet, it was literally a millimeter from my femoral artery. Now, that's the main artery running down your leg. And if that artery is sliced, you bleed out and you die. So it is nestled right next to the artery. And the doctor says to me, you're a miracle. You're going to live. But we don't know what we're going to do about that bullet because we're very concerned about going in there and messing with it because we don't want to tweak that artery. This is touch or go. So what proceeded, to wrap it up here, was the longest night of my life, April 8th, 1999. And by the way, at this time, I had everything to live for. I just graduated college. I'm sending out resumes and writing clips, ready to embark on this journalism career. And it was the worst night of my life. And look, am I going to walk again? Okay, I'm going to live. That's great. Am I going to walk again? Well, I have a limp for the rest of my life. What does this look like? A wheelchair? What does it look like? They couldn't tell me. Very touch or go. I didn't sleep a wink. I'm in excruciating pain, by the way. I have a fresh bullet burning in my hip. And I'm staring at the ceiling the entire night, and I'm saying, God, why? And I didn't know the Lord personally yet. I believed in God, but I didn't have a personal relationship with the Lord Jesus yet. I wish I did at that moment. But I'm saying, God, why did this happen? And what do I have to live for now? I mean, I'm shot. Where does my life go from here? I was in the pit of life, and 8 a.m, after a sleepless night, the phone rings in my hospital room, and it's my dad. And he had taken a little break from being by my bedside at the hospital and gone home to get some sleep. He said, Eric, you just got a message on the answering machine. Now, kids, mind you, this was 1999. We had answering machines back then in our houses and landlines. Imagine that. You just got an answering machine. A message from Slam magazine. Now, this was a national basketball publication. Yeah. Newsstands across the country. I loved it. My favorite magazine. On a whim, I sent them my resume and some writing clips, never expecting them to get back to me. Lo and behold, they leave a message on the machine, and they want me to write an article for them, and they'll pay me for it. And they're in New York City. And my dad said, you better call them back. So I hang the phone up. And mind you, again, 10 hours prior, I was shot. I'm in a hospital bed with a bullet burning in my hip. I call Slam magazine. Yes, this is Erick Stakelbeck. It's very nice to meet you. I'd be glad to write your fine publication. In a hospital gown in a bed with a bullet in me. Unbelievable. And Alan, the moral of the story is this. That was my first ever professional media gig.
Wow.
So I was in the pit. I mean, the absolute pit of life. And just when I thought I couldn't go any further, God reached down, pulled me out of the pit, and said, I'm not done with you yet. He can do it for me. He can do it for anyone watching right now. He will never leave you or forsake you, no matter how dark it gets. That's what he did for me. That's where all of this began, in that hospital bed 10 hours after I was shot in my hometown of Philadelphia.
Wow. What a message. God can reach you in your darkest moment, your darkest hour, and then change the season in your life. He changes the times and the seasons. And so you're writing for Slam Magazine, you're doing sports writing, you're living the dream. How do you transition from sports writing to writing about the Middle East? It seems like quite a shift.
Yeah.
But it reminds me of every chick flick rom-com where the lady works for a gossip magazine and she wants to write about hard-hitting issues, you know.
Yeah, I want to be taken seriously as a journalist.
That's right.
I love basketball. I love covering it, but I just knew it wasn't for me as a career long term. It was a great training ground. I learned a lot in terms of writing, deadlines, covering events, interviews. It was great. And living in New York City, my gosh, what an experience. I wouldn't want to be there today, by the way.
My goodness.
Especially if, God forbid, Mamdani wins. That's another story. But an experience, you know. So, but as I mentioned earlier, I had this passion throughout my adolescence, my teen years, for foreign policy, politics, the Middle East, and I always was a very, very keen observer of all of that. It was a passion of mine. Now, I never thought it would be a career, but I come back from New York City after, close to a year there, great experience. My wife-to-be was living in Philadelphia. It was tough to have the long-distance relationship, so I come back to Philly, and I'm kind of figuring out my next move. I'm freelance writing. I'm tutoring kids in English, just figuring it out. What's next? And still following the Middle East and foreign policy and politics very, very closely, 9/11 happens. And it had such an impact on me just as a concerned American. I still never thought it would be a career. I just started pouring all of my energies into studying the Quran, the Middle East, Al-Qaeda. And I had the background knowledge and the interest already for much of this, but just enhancing my knowledge, again, as a concerned American. And then after about 8 or 9 months of this, because look, in 9/11, or at that time, I should say, we all thought the other shoe was going to drop.
Yeah.
And that there'd be more massive terror attacks, God forbid, but that was the feeling at the time. So I said, look, the first rule of war, Sun Tzu, know your enemy. I wanted to know what we were up against as a nation, and still didn't think it would be a career. But after about 8, 9 months, I'm walking down the beach on vacation with my wife, who was then my fiance, and I'm talking about jihad or Sharia law or some pleasant subject on my vacation with my wife. And she said, hey, you're a writer. Why don't you write about this? This is your passion, clearly. Why don't you write about this? And Alan, it was like the light bulb went off above my head. I said, you know what? Maybe you're right. Maybe I'll throw my hat in the ring. I think I can write authoritatively about this. And I sent my again, on a whim, sent my resume and clips to a guy I admired. His name was David Horowitz.
Oh, my goodness.
Passed away earlier this year.
What a fearless investigative writer. Dark Agenda, Unholy Alliance.
Exactly.
Wow.
And I loved him because exactly that, Alan. You said it. He was fearless. He was a former communist. His parents were Stalinists, and he became a conservative. And I love that about him. I said, that guy's got guts.
Yeah, there he is.
David was incredible. And to my shock, he got back to me and said, okay, kid, I'll give you a shot. So I started writing for his website, frontpagemagazine.com. And then after about a month or two of that, he called me and hired me as a researcher. He said, I'm working on a book about campus radicalism, the radical left, radical Islamist on campus. Mind you, this was 2002, early 2003.
Wow.
So it's a problem today, clearly on campus. It was even a problem back then. So I'm working with David as a researcher on this book for about 7 months. And again, God moved fast. Look, I'm sitting in a little row home, my wife's little row house in Northeast Philadelphia, staring at a gateway computer, doing this research. This is 2002, early 2003. And I interview a guy named Steve Emerson. Now, he was a very well-known name, particularly then, but just a great terrorism expert. He was the man on this subject. And I'm interviewing Steve for an article I'm writing for Front Page Magazine. And I happen to mention an article I'd recently written about the Muslim Students Association. And Steve Emerson says, wait a minute, that was you? I read that article. I loved it. And then in the next breath, Alan, he says, I don't even know Steve from Adam. I'd just been talking to him for about 20 minutes on the phone. He said, I love that piece. I could use a writer like you. What would you think about moving to Washington, D.C. and coming to work for me? At his think tank in D.C., it's called the Investigative Project on Terrorism.
Wow.
What are the odds? And if I hadn't mentioned that article I'd written, it would have never happened. But I said, oh yeah, I just wrote an article about them. He said, wait a minute, hold on, back up. That was you? Come work for me. And lo and behold, 2 months after that conversation, I'm packing my bags and moving to Washington, D.C. And then really things went into overdrive. I mean, working for Steve at his great think tank and writing articles, Wall Street Journal, New York Post, Washington Times, covering all of the issues. And now I'm in D.C. and I'm interfacing with some pretty heavy hitters and getting a lay of the land in the nation's capital. And I start doing TV at that point. It's kind of a funny story. I'll keep it very brief because I feel like I'm rambling a bit. Apologies.
No, this is great. Thank you.
This is Palm Sunday, 2004. I had been wanting to do TV. Steve had done it. It was incredible on TV. And a few of the guys I worked with, Steve would say, hey, go on Fox News. Go ahead. They called for me, but why don't you go on? So I said, man, I'd like to do that. I think I could be pretty good at it. And it's Palm Sunday, or the night before Palm Sunday, Saturday night. I remember I mentioned a basketball fan, right? I was watching the Final Four on TV, college basketball. And around 10 o'clock at night, my boss, Steve, calls me and says, hey, Fox and Friends, which you probably all know is a top-rated cable news show, even back in 2004. They want me to come on at 6:15 a.m. I can't do it. I have another commitment. I need you to do it. Now, it's about 10 o'clock at night, and he's calling me for a 6:15 a.m. hit the next morning.
Mm-hmm.
I said, I'll do it. So, Alan, I'm up till about 1 in the morning, like
Prepping.
literally prepping, scribbling notes on my hand. What am I going to say? Talking about Al-Qaeda in Europe. Now, this is 2004, a major terror attack in Madrid. They call it the Madrid train bombing. Had just happened, many people killed. Al-Qaeda was the scourge at that time, 2004, still in the aftermath of 9/11. So the next morning, I go on 6:15 sharp, national TV, Fox and Friends, and I look back now. I wish you could find that clip. That would have been a hoot. I cringe now when I look back, but you know what? I did okay in retrospect because they brought me back after the commercial break. So I said, okay, I must be doing okay. And Alan, I caught the bug in that experience because it went well. I got good feedback from the Fox people, and they kept calling. And I was doing various media outlets. And then I decided, you know what? I think I want to go TV full time. I love writing, and I still write all the time. But man, I saw TV as a way to reach maybe a broader audience with the message. And CBN News, the Christian Broadcasting Network, my dear friends at CBN News, you mentioned earlier, I was there for 10 years. They hired me at their Washington, D.C. bureau in early 2005. And Alan, I laugh when I look back because talk about training ground. CBN was so great to me. By the way, I got saved at CBN.
Wow.
Came to know the Lord there. Amazing. But they put me on the 700 Club, which is, of course, a legendary show, 1 million viewers a day at least, about a month in. And I was green. I mean, wow. And they put me on the club live with Pat Robertson. I mean, a month in, I'm live with Pat Robertson. I'm saying, oh gosh, what am I going to do? What am I going to say? And Pat we grew over the years. We built such a great rapport. But Pat would throw you curveballs, man, as an interviewer. You had to be on your toes and ready for what he was going to ask. But I guess it went okay. And over the years, I just built up where I was frequently with Pat. We had a great thing going. I was in D.C. He was in Virginia Beach. Like I'm talking to you now on the split screen remotely. And we really built a great relationship. But that was absolutely at CBN News. I was hired as a correspondent.
Yes.
So the reporter game was all new to me, Alan. Look, I was used to being kind of a talking head like doing now with you. But then I had to learn that side of it as a correspondent. And again, God was honing these skills and flexing new muscles. And the most intimidating thing for me early on was the voiceover booth. Now, being from Philadelphia,
Why
you
in the
can hear
world would that be the most? You have the best voiceover voice of anybody I've ever heard.
Oh my gosh, thank you, man. That means a lot coming from you, especially the Philadelphia accent. And you can
see.
hear it now. I let it hang out when we're just talking like we are now, like friends, as we are.
Yeah.
But at that time, we're talking late 2004, early 2005, it was pretty thick. And for instance, people are going to laugh. Most of America says water. In Philadelphia, we'd say, give me a glass of water. Things like that, which I didn't really realize. Then all of a sudden, I'm in the voiceover booth with this script, and I had a boss at the time, good guy, who would actually circle words in the script and say, no Philly. Don't sound like Philly here. You got to have more of a flat kind of no accent. So I learned a lot, but that was funny. That was the early intimidating thing, the voiceover booth. But the Lord, God was faithful, and he just shepherded me through it. And I had people at CBN News who just loved on me, gently witnessed to me. Great people. Oh my gosh. So indebted to them. They gently witnessed to me and loved on me. And man, I gave my life to the Lord August 2009. That's 16 years ago, almost, little past the anniversary there. That's another interesting story with a major Israel angle. I know I'm taking up a lot of time.
No. It's great, especially now looking where you are now, which is probably one of the most advanced studios I've ever seen or been in, how the Lord has kind of promoted you and elevated you throughout that time. And the experience you've had traveling throughout Europe, going into mosques, doing investigative work into the Muslim community. And if I can, I thought of this since you mentioned Horowitz, and I think the book was called Unholy Alliance, where he talks about the merging of the left and the Islamic Jihad, essentially, that the radical Islam and radical left merging together. I don't know when that book was written. Maybe 20 years ago, right?
Alan, you're exactly right. Talk about being ahead of the curve.
Yes.
I believe David wrote that in 2003.
Wow. Yeah.
Can you believe it? I mean, and talk about being prescient, right? I mean, look now, 2025, it's all, we have seen it play out in real time before our very eyes over the past 2 years since the October 7th massacre, that Unholy Alliance. Radical Islamist, the radical left, on campus together, in the streets together, people wearing Queers for Palestine shirts, marching next to Muslim Brotherhood jihadis. You can't make this stuff up. But Alan, they share a disdain, a hatred for Judeo-Christian Western civilization.
Yeah.
And for the God of the Bible. That's the radical Islamist and the radical left. That's what they have in common. They both want to bring down American society as we know it. The left, the radical left, wants to replace it with, I don't know what. It seems like anarchy these days as they're attacking ICE and law enforcement, a socialist utopia in their view. And of course, the Islamist wants Sharia law for one and all, whether you like it or not. So they have a different end game, but they both share that desire to bring America down and bring Western civilization down. And of course, bring Israel down, which is the first line of defense for Western civilization. They have vastly different end games for that, but all they know is they want to destroy. And they want to tear down what our founders built and what, by extension, God Almighty built in this nation. And look, the U.S. military, ICE, these are all enemies of this unholy alliance, no doubt. The Constitution, the concept of faith, family, and freedom, the 3 F's that made this country great, that is to them a mockery. They disdain it. And they're increasingly working together. Alan, last thing I'll say about it, and in Europe as well, here's a cautionary tale for the left, for the Queers for Palestine crowd who's embracing the Muslim Brotherhood in the streets. 1979, the Iranian Revolution, this wicked regime currently in power, came to power in 79. The communists and the Marxists in Iran wholeheartedly supported the Ayatollah. They supported the Iranian Revolution and the jihadis taking power. Guess what? A few months later, the first people with their heads on the chopping block were the communists and the Marxists. They were the definition of what Lenin called useful idiots.
Yeah.
And we see it now with the left today. They're using the Islamists, and they think the Islamists, hey, they're our foot soldiers, they're our muscle in a sense. But if the Islamists ever got power, the left, the Queers for Palestine crowd would be the first ones to feel the brunt of that jihadi rage.
Well, we see these no-go zones now in Europe, and you've probably walked through these, investigated these. There's no way that that's going to happen here in the United States.
Well, I would say cautionary tale, my friend.
So tell us,
tell
us about the danger of that.
Yeah, I think number one, a few places I'm looking at, Minneapolis.
Yeah, sure.
And I've covered that extensively. In one of my books, I wrote a whole chapter about Minneapolis and the Somali jihadist presence there. You had a pipeline going from Minneapolis back to Somalia, where people were joining the jihad in Somalia from Somalis living in Minneapolis in the Twin Cities area, going back to Somalia. And what I've always said, Alan, and we had American jihadis go and join ISIS. I wrote about that as well extensively. What I've always said, this applies to America and Europe, is okay, these young radical jihadis, they leave the shores of America or Europe and they go to Somalia or Chechnya or Syria to join the jihad, join ISIS, join Al-Qaeda. What happens when they return? They're not going to just be fresh off the battlefields of some foreign theater and then come back to America and get a job at McDonald's. It's much more likely, God forbid, that they bring the jihad and their new job skills, quote unquote, here. And that's the big concern I have. That's number one. But number two, we see this in Europe. It's self-inflicted. It's cultural suicide.
Yes.
Look at the UK. I mean, I can't recognize it now. And you and I were talking off camera, Alan. George Orwell. He was a Brit, of course. He was an Englishman. He wrote 1984 about a dystopian future Britain. We're getting there. I mean, 1984 looks very familiar right now. If you're looking at Great Britain, for instance, a guy named Tommy Robinson, it's a name people may know. He's a leading anti-jihad activist, a patriotic Brit. He just led a march in London, about 1 million strong, if not more, a month ago, waving the Union Jack, waving the flag of St. George, saying, we want to take Britain back for the British, for God and country. Well, right now, he's been dragged before a kangaroo court in the UK on terrorism charges. It's unexplainable. Meanwhile, you have countless genuine Islamic terrorists living in the UK right now, off the government dole, by the way. Yet Tommy Robinson is an enemy of the state. And we have police. We've seen many videos on X and across social media, 2, 3 in the morning, police knocking at the door of some unsuspecting Englishman and saying, you posted something racially inflammatory on Facebook, and this is a warning, next time we're going to arrest you for a Facebook post opposing illegal immigration, because the UK has been invaded, and it's a voluntary invasion. The elites in the UK, Alan, have welcomed them in. They've opened the floodgates over the past 30 years, and now you do have. There are places in London and in the UK, I've been there, I've walked the streets, I've covered it on camera, I've written about it, where you don't feel very comfortable, needless to say, if you're a non-Muslim. And we see it in France, we see it in Belgium, we see it even in places like Sweden. But bringing it back to America, Alan, which you brought up, Minneapolis, New York City, and if Zoran Mamdani, who I mentioned earlier, if he becomes mayor of New York City, look out, because I look at what another leftist/Islamist, Sadiq Khan, the current mayor of London, I look at what he's done to that city over the past 10 years, and Zoran Mamdani, I think, will follow that blueprint in New York City. And by the way, where I'm sitting right now, Texas, which is known as, hey, you're talking God and country, faith, family, freedom, Texas is the place to be. Guess what? There's a growing Islamic population in this state, and there's a Muslim Brotherhood presence here as well. So we are not immune to this in America. Thank God for Donald Trump. We've got a reprieve here, I believe, as a nation, but this is something we need to be very vigilant about.
Well, we say never forget in regard to 9/11. I don't think we even remember what we're supposed to remember, that radical Islam is a threat to Western civilization, and they are constantly working, which is why what's happening in Israel is so prescient and important for the average believer to understand, because that's their first target, and then their second target is the United States. If we're not able to hold or have a stronghold there in Israel of freedom, then it's going to come over here to our shores.
Alan, great point. And I say this all the time, and we see obviously the left, Islamists, the globalists, they hate Israel. But the so-called woke right, people like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens. This is becoming a big problem because they're fervently anti-Israel, and I would say anti-Semitic in their rhetoric, and they're having great influence, especially on young Christians. They're saying, look, God's done with Israel. He's done with the Jews. We don't need to support Israel. Newsflash, Israel is in the literal belly of the beast.
Come on.
The first line of defense for Western civilization. Israel's enemies and America's enemies are one in the same. And by the way, we mentioned 9/11. Alan, since 9/11, Israeli intelligence services have helped us, we, America, break up literally thousands of terror plots on U.S. soil and against American citizens abroad. So you want to abandon Israel? Look, before even, and they say, well, it's all Israel's fault that the jihadis want to kill us. If it wasn't for Israel, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah, etc., they'd leave us alone. They're only concerned about Israel. Here's a little history lesson. The nation of Israel was miraculously reborn in 1948. But for about 2,000 years before that, Alan, a nation state of Israel didn't exist. The Jewish people were dispersed in the first century to the ends of the earth, like the Bible said would happen. And also, like God said would happen, they returned in the latter days in 1948. But during that 2,000-year period, from the 7th century when Islam roared out of the Arabian Peninsula on to 1948, we saw wave after wave of jihad. I mean, the Islamists got to the gates of Vienna twice. They drove into central France. They conquered Hungary. They drove all throughout Eastern Europe, conquered Greece. All of that happened, that jihad against the West, when Israel didn't even exist, at least officially. So at the end of the day, it's not about Israel. It's just that Israel's enemies and the enemies of the West are one in the same. There's an old saying in radical Islam. First comes Saturday, the Saturday people, the Jews. Then comes Sunday, the Sunday people, the Christians. So if you think that abandoning Israel will stave off the jihadi wave, you're sadly mistaken.
You're just feeding the crocodile, and eventually he's coming for you.
Said.
Yeah. So I want us to look at some good news of the last 48 hours. I just want to make sure that we're viewing this in a very sober manner, which is why we've kind of led into it with this conversation, because we're about to see these hostages released. And as we watch this, I want you to keep in mind, those of you that are watching, that these 20 hostages that were released, that was in exchange for 2,000 prisoners, terrorists, who were released. However, we are thankful to get them back. So this is kind of a bittersweet moment for many in Israel. But we're thankful to cross this threshold. Let's take a look at just one of these hostages being reunited with their family.
אתה חייב לשתות קצת, נשמה, טיפה טיפה. הוא ביקש לשלוח את זה לחדשות, לשלוח את זה? יאללה, למי לשלוח?
Can you imagine seeing your family member for the first time in a couple of years? And before I ask Eric about the prophetic significance of this and the fulfillment of prophecy, when you see captives being returned, I want to talk to the audience very quickly. We've got to be on the ground here and helping those who have been affected by these last 2 years of war in the nation of Israel. And we've got teams on the ground right now to do that. And I want to ask you to partner with us. If you go to encountertoday.com and you click the special offer, here's what we're going to give you for a gift of any size, just to help us be a blessing to the persecuted church and to those in the nation of Israel who have been affected by this. I want to send you this Revival Nation magazine, as well as our Armed magazine, both of them, where we have Todd Coconato, Joseph Z., Troy Brewer, and others, myself and others, writing prophetically about what God is doing in the remainder of this year and going into 26. We want to send this to you for a gift of any size when you partner with us to help be a blessing to those in the nation of Israel right now. So you click the link in the description and then go to our special offer. Again, a gift of any size. Just help us be the light of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Brother Eric, when you watch this is certainly a prophetic moment. As someone who is so involved with the nation of Israel and the Middle East, what are your initial reactions?
I think on one hand, jubilation that the hostages are home. On the other hand, awe at President Trump, who you mentioned Churchill earlier. I mean, I think Bibi is a Churchillian figure. I think President Trump is as well. and just an appreciation of peace through strength, which always works, as Trump and Bibi have both shown. I think also some hesitation, Alan, in that, look, jubilation, the hostages are home. You showed that powerful footage just a second ago, but also the realization in knowing that there's much work to be done. Hamas is still in Gaza. Now, this was just phase one. The hostages released, incredible, but already Hamas is playing games. They released the 20 living hostages, but there are still the remains of 24 more hostages that they haven't handed over. Now, they handed over the remains of 4 of them yesterday, these hostages who were killed. Then Hamas, to show you how ghoulish they are, Alan, they hung on to the remains, the dead bodies, as ransom. I mean, it's just sick and demonic. They're a demonic Nazi death cult for the modern day. So they're playing games already. They've not handed back the remains of 24 hostages as they agreed to. Secondly, this is a key point, Alan. Phase 2 of the deal that President Trump brokered calls for Hamas to disarm.
Yes.
That's where it gets really interesting. Is Hamas an organization, a death cult that exists to maim and murder and rape and pillage? Are they really going to lay down their arms? How do you ensure that that happens? Is it this coalition of the Saudis, the UAE, Turkey, Qatar, etc., maybe with the U.S. overseeing it? How do we ensure that Hamas hands over its weapons? Look, right now it's joy. The hostages are home, and we should have joy. It's a blessing. But there are some tough things coming down the pike. That's one, disarming Hamas, for sure. And also, I think in a prophetic sense, you're going to have a period of peace and prosperity right now. It's very likely. I think we're looking at the positive, and there's a lot of positive about this. The Abraham Accords, I think, are very much back on the table. Now that Gaza is kind of settled up, and I believe Hamas, by the way, will be disarmed one way or the other. It just might not be pretty, but we'll see. But at any rate, I think a normalization deal between Israel and Saudi Arabia is now very much on the table. Alan, there's even rumblings of Lebanon and Syria coming to the table with Israel, Indonesia. All of this was unthinkable even 10 years ago. President Trump, this cannot be understated, changed the game completely. When he came on the scene, became president early 2017, obviously the first go round with the Abraham Accords in 2020 with Bahrain, the UAE, and Morocco. And, you know, it's God's timing. He was out of office those 4 years. It was God's timing for him to return at this time in history. And now everything's on the table. I think the Abraham Accords will expand. I think you'll see Israel, by the way, really begin to step into its prophetic destiny.
Yes.
Israel, I think, is now the regional superpower. It's also a global power. I think it's undeniable between its military might, which it showed to great effect in the past 2 years, its economic might, the innovation, the ingenuity. Great things, I think, lie ahead for Israel for sure. But I'm looking down the road, Alan, and I hope this period of peace and prosperity lasts for a long time. But if you know the word of God, you know prophecy, you look down the road, looming somewhere in the future is that war of Gog and Magog, laid out in the book of Ezekiel, chapters 38 and 39. So eventually that day will come. But for now, I think we're going to see some prophetic chess pieces moving in a positive sense in the short term.
Yeah, in a second, I want to take a look at what Trump had to say about the entire Middle East and what's next for the Middle East. But speaking to the ghoulish nature of Hamas, we'll notice I don't believe any female hostages were returned. They were each one of them brutalized in ways that we're not even going to discuss here and killed, as well as many of the men. So this is, and then we release an army, 2,000, an army of butchers in response to this. But whatever it takes to get them back, because Hamas is going to, there's this building up of a coalition through, we're just winning so much with President Trump that even the Islamic nations are coming on board. Let's take a listen to what Trump had to say when he's talking about the Middle East and rebuilding the Middle East and what that's going to look like.
What guarantee did you give Hamas to persuade them that Israel will restart the bombing campaign once the hostages have been exchanged?
What did I do with respect to them? Well, you know, I spoke a little bit tough, and that's what would happen. I mean, you have to speak tough. That's a tough world. That's a tough, as they say, neighborhood. And they're tough people. They're very tough people, and they're smart people. They're good negotiators. They have a lot of things going. They put that to good use. They're going to be very, very successful. But they knew the retribution would be tremendous, unsustainable. It would have been unsustainable. It would have been complete obliteration, and they didn't want that. And nobody wants it at this point. They want to get on with rebuilding the entire Middle East. It's not only Gaza. It's going to be the entire Middle East. They're going to be able to live in peace. Now, we have some little hot spots, but they're very small. You know the ones I'm talking about. They're very small. They'll be very easy to put out. Those fires are going to be put out very quickly. Yes.
So he's looking long term. He's looking at leveraging this moment. I think actually it's moving. I think he's dealing with China as a result of this deal, because China needs the Middle East. It needs, even though it's working with Russia, it needs Middle Eastern oil. It needs those coalitions. And I think Trump is kind of bringing all of these Middle Eastern nations together through this momentum right now, just building on the global power and influence of the United States. What do you think he's talking about when he says the entire Middle East?
Well, I think absolutely he feels, number one, the Saudis, et cetera, like I said, Alan, will come to the table. But he's been talking a bit about Iran. Mm-hmm. And look, he sent the ultimate message back in June.
Boy, did
and with destroying Iran's nuclear facilities with the beautiful B-2s, as he would call them. But he still thinks that there's a chance that he could bring Iran into the fold of normal nations, I guess you would say. Not with this current regime, Alan. It's not going to happen. And President Trump is the deal maker. Look, the art of the deal, we see it time and time again. He's anointed by God to do this. Many have called him a modern-day Cyrus. So he is the man to cut the deals, no doubt, solving intractable problems. But the Iranian regime is not someone who's going – they're not a group of individuals who are going to play ball. Their backs are against the wall, yes. But Ronald Reagan, another great man, once said about the Soviet Union, when dealing with the Soviets, trust but verify. When dealing with the Iranians and their proxies like Hamas, don't trust but verify should be the slogan. So I don't think Iran is eager to play ball. Alan, they've shown the exact opposite, actually. Since their nuclear facilities were destroyed back in June and their ballistic missile program, Israel heavily demolished that as well. They've been working to rebuild their ballistic missile program, to rebuild their nuclear program. So they don't seem to have gotten the memo. It's still the same confrontational rhetoric from the Ayatollahs. And I think at the end of the day, Alan, it shows that this is a spiritual battle. We are up against evil, and evil is relentless. If history shows us anything, unless evil is utterly destroyed, it will continue to rear its head and come back. That's the nature of evil. Look, the Iranian regime, Hamas, Hezbollah, all these groups, if they lay down their arms and suddenly become peaceful, who are they? They exist. Again, their whole rationale for being is to murder, maim, and destroy because they're from the enemy. They're satanic organizations. So I don't think the Iranian regime is going to reform. And as long as they're in power, you're going to have an issue.
Well, the State Department knows this, right? I mean, the State Department knows this. The Department of Defense knows this. What are the odds of toppling that regime? Because it seems that the majority of the people of Iran would love to see a change in regimes.
Yeah, Alan, I'm glad you brought this up. What a great point. A few things for people to remember. Number one, it's estimated that 80% of the Iranian people despise the regime.
Yes.
So they don't speak for the vast majority of the Iranian people. That's number one. Number two, the regime has never been weaker than it is right now. Talk about being vulnerable to internal overthrow. I mean, I think what the Iranian people need on the ground is kind of their version of Lech Walesa. You think in the 1980s, the Cold War, that great leader of the Polish Solidarity movement who stood against the Soviets. I think the Iranians need a galvanizing resistance figure on the ground right now in some capacity. That may be helpful. We'll see if that emerges. But God's not done with this nation. And I really want people to realize that Iran is a Bible land. You might say, what are you talking about? They're the world's number one state sponsor of terrorism. Yes. But remember, modern day Iran in your Bible was ancient Persia.
That's right.
We're talking Esther, Mordecai, Cyrus, Darius. This is a Bible land and a place of exile for the Jewish people after the Babylonian dispersion. Then Cyrus let them return and rebuild the temple and return to Jerusalem. So that's one thing. God's not done with that land. Also, very encouraging, Alan, the world's fastest growing church is in Iran. Despite all the persecution, the oppression, it's largely underground, but believers are just blossoming and expanding in Iran. Again, underground, because you can't stop the gospel.
Yeah.
The Iranian regime can't stop it. Communist China can't stop it. So the gospel's spreading in Iran. So I just encourage everyone to pray for that very troubled nation because God's doing something there.
Certainly, history is an indicator of what is possible in the future, and Iran has already had a Jewish queen, so there can be change, there can be turnaround. I know that's perking Evan's ears, who's studied actually ancient Persia quite extensively.
Well, I just thought if Trump is being described as kind of a Cyrus, it's interesting that in Daniel 9, the decree of Cyrus to send God's chosen people back to their land, that was a specific marker in time where the countdown began for the Messiah to come to earth for the first Advent.
Evan, come on.
So I almost wonder if this announcement is kind of the start of the countdown to where we're entering into the last of the last of the last days.
That's why we keep him around, Eric. That's why we keep him around.
Yeah, I was just saying, good stuff, man. Absolutely, and I think you're on point. And I think, look, I think we're crossing a prophetic threshold here, no doubt. You can just feel it. And I think God spared Donald Trump's life for a reason. And I think this is a big part of it for the chess pieces moving in the Middle East right now. And he's a true friend of Israel. And things are being set up right now. I truly believe that. You can see it, you can feel it. And Trump on the world stage doing what he's doing, it's part of God's plan for sure. And he's the man for this position for such a time as this. Mentioning Esther, it goes without saying. So no doubt, I think we're seeing the prophetic chess pieces moving. Things are being set up. And I look at America and Israel as the irreplaceable nations, the two fiercely sovereign nations that still adhere to Judeo-Christian values. And they're really the defenders of Judeo-Christian Western civilization. Even though Israel's in the heart of the Middle East, it's the birthplace of Western civilization. You can argue, Alan, that Western civilization began on Mount Sinai 3,500 years ago when God gave Moses the Ten Commandments. That's where it all derives from. And then Jerusalem, of course. So it all began in Israel. And they are, again, the canary in the coal mine when it comes to defending our civilization. Hey, it's not perfect, but it's the best thing going, Western civilization. And I believe that America under President Trump's leadership really is now that shining city on a hill as the rest of the West is going off a cliff. It's post-Christian Europe. It's hedonism, wokeness, Islamism. It's a mess. But America is a beacon of sanity. And I shudder to think, Alan, what would have happened nearly a year ago if Kamala Harris would have won the 2024 election.
We are actually in a golden age, and shame on us if we don't leverage this moment and take advantage of it as ministers of the gospel, as believers. I've got another question for you. Now that I know that you worked with Horowitz, which is so impressive to me, by the way, because I've always loved his writings. But before I ask that question, those of you that are watching, pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Now's the time to partner with those on the ground. And we have people on the ground right now doing missions work as we speak today. And we need your help to partner with us. So if you'll go to encountertoday.com, click on special offer, and we'll send you absolutely free these two magazines, Revival Nation magazine, where we have articles from Todd Coconato, Joseph Z., Troy Brewer, myself, and others, and the Arm magazine. We'll send them both to you for a gift of any size, just to thank you for partnering with us to be a blessing to the nation of Israel. Here's a final question for you, Erick Stakelbeck. Your favorite Horowitz book, what is it? What does everybody need to read?
Other than the one I worked on? I'm kidding. It's got to be Unholy Alliance.
Yeah.
That was a seminal book for me, and we're talking about it. Yeah, he actually wrote a book, too, great title, Hating Whitey, all about the racial grievance industry, which was great as well. But those two really hop out at me because I love his recent works, too. I read them all, but they were transformative for me, Alan, as a guy breaking into this business back then. Let me just say, by the way, too, I love Revival Nation, everything you're doing at your ministry.
Oh, thank you.
And what a time to do it. The harvest is ripe right now.
Yes.
Especially in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination. What the enemy meant for evil there with Charlie, God is using for good. And the gospel is spreading. Young people are on fire. So amazing things are happening. I think the devil badly overplayed his hand with the death of Charlie Kirk. And I'm just thankful for you, Alan, and Joseph Z, and everyone who's leading revival in this nation. It's amazing to see.
We feel the same about you. So how can people connect with you and the work that you do?
Yeah, number one, you can watch Stacklebeck Tonight, my nightly show on TBN, every weeknight, Monday through Friday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, with a re-air at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And then YouTube. The YouTube channel focuses mainly on the Middle East, Israel, everything happening there. It's Watchman, that's M-A-N, WatchmanTV.com. I think we have close to 1.1 million subscribers now, hard to believe. So TBN, YouTube, then the podcast. It's called the Stackscast. You can check that out, Apple, Spotify. So we're keeping busy.
Solid Christian journalism you can trust, biblically based, with its finger on the pulse of Bible prophecy. Erick Stakelbeck, what an honor to have you on the program. Thank you.
Alan, it was a pleasure. Always great to be with you, my friend. God bless. Thanks again.
God bless. And those of you watching, I've got one more thing to show you. Here it is. You will never again doubt God's desire to bless you. When you get my latest book, 101 Prosperity Confessions, you're going to learn how to align your mouth with heaven's economy and unlock the blessings of God. For too long, we've been propagandized by a poverty mentality, and it's time for the body of Christ to rise up, to receive the wealth transfer and understand what God has promised from His Word. So allow me, if you will, to take you through this devotional. 101 days of scripture, devotion, and confession that will renew your mind, transform your life, and help us as a church advance the kingdom. Get your copy of 101 Prosperity Confessions today and align your mouth with heaven's economy.